good morning, and good afternoon or good night whenever you're looking at this wonderful young man on the video here. I'll tell you who he is in just a second. Good morning. My name is Alex Nelson. Welcome to the Difference Makers, where we listen to people that are actually making a difference all over the state of North Carolina. And right now, there's very few people that's making as much difference as Representative Jeff Zenger, who is in front of you today. He frontlines the General Assembly, working on key issues like tax reform, state budget, policies that affect everyday North Carolinians. I couldn't be more happier. So, Jeff, I'm going to turn the floor over to you to say hi to all of your constituents real quick, and I'll get into some questions for you in just a second.
Sure. Hey, it's great to be here. I represent District 74, which is the eastern or western side of Forsyth County, Clemens, Louisville, and Tobaccoville. And it's really glad to do that. We've been able to do a lot of great work and great things over the last 6 years that I've been there. Looking forward to going back and doing even more. Been able to be kind of in the off season here since we left last fall, going back and forth, being on the property tax committee. I don't know if how many of your folks have gotten outrageous property tax bills or assessments, but let me tell you, that is a topic that is red hot, not just locally, but all the way to Raleigh.
Well, we'll get it. I'm going to ask you questions about that, Jeff. And let's get started with the big picture. What's really going on in Raleigh right now, and what should people back home be paying attention to? I think you might have just answered some of it.
Yeah, well, basically what happens is we've got a bunch of bills in House rules. We've got a bunch of bills in Senate rules. And so right now they'll be the leadership, the two corner offices will be working together to decide which bills are going to move. And so it's kind of a negotiating standard. There are bills that are really near and dear to the Senate's heart. There's bills that are really near and dear to the House thing. And so they'll negotiate back and forth, say, well, you move this one, and we'll move this one. Also, there'll be, during that opportunity, there may be bills that are bundled together where the House and the Senate come together and say, hey, let's take this bill and this bill. They're extremely similar. Let's do a conference report on them, get them nailed down, run them through. And so there's all kinds of negotiation like that happening. There'll be a few bills filed, but really we have a little like 3-day window to file bills in the short session. So it'll be more doing what's called a PCS, a post-committee substitute, where bills get rewritten or added to and then moved. And all of that is negotiated as well, because you can't, if you just go ahead and take a Senate bill, if I just take a Senate bill and put on it whatever I want, well, if the Senate's not for that, I've just wasted my time and it's not going to move. And so you'll talk to the bill sponsors and work. And that's what will happen. And as that goes on, those bills will start to move through committees. All of those bills, for the most part, on the House rules and the Senate rules, still have to go through the committee process in their respective chambers. So they'll get sent out and go through, usually it's 3 committees, the last one being, again, the House rules, and then it'll hit the floor of the House or vice versa on the Senate. And so that's where you'll start to see some movement. It's not, a lot of folks kind of have this impression that, once the short session starts, it's like this free for all. It's really not. There's a lot going on. Now, what will happen is it'll appear a little bit like a free for all as the time starts to run out. We get down to the end of June, and there'll be bills that have been moving through committees and they've been debated and they're changed and they're moved. And now the clock, it's kind of like the 2-minute warning hits, and all of a sudden everything starts going nuts. Mm-hmm. And so, and in the midst of all of that, there'll be a budget deal. We do have scheduled, typically we're down there 2 days a week, maybe 3. We're scheduled right now for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. But I think it's the week of May 20th, if I remember, we're scheduled there to be all week. And so it looks like that leadership is gearing up for that to be the heavy lifting week. So there'll be all kinds of stuff moving between now and then. So that's really kind of how it works. And once you start to see it move through committees, then it'll hit the House floor. So here at the beginning, you won't see very many bills voted on because they have to go through the committee process. And then all of a sudden, if you look at the agenda for each House session, it'll be more and more and more bills because they've worked all the way through.
Well, I tell you what's on my mind and a lot of people's minds, and you know what's coming. I sit here and
Yeah.
had to work on taxes all the last 3 months. I'm losing hair. Me and you are going to be twins very shortly. Property taxes are a major concern for my family and a lot of your
Yeah.
constituents as well. Can you break that down Barney style on the property tax reform and what that
Yeah.
means, what's currently being discussed?
All right. So let me give you a little background. So everybody's property taxes, they get these huge tax assessments, and then um, you know the county commissioners, the municipalities can adjust their tax rate. Well, a lot of them didn't or did very little, and so their tax, the actual dollar amount of what happened with their property taxes went up huge. I mean, I'm not talking, I think everybody expects property taxes to go up, but we're talking 53%, 63%, 73%. I mean, huge numbers.
Mhm.
I had a woman, I used it as the example in the committee. I had a letter from a lady, she's 72, had lived in her house for decades and decades and decades. And, everything is kind of built up around her. She saw her taxes go up since 2021 of 121%. And she wrote and she said, I'm 72 years old. And based on the recent assessment that I've got, my taxes are going to be at such a point that I'm going to have to pay $790 a month to keep the house that I have paid for decades ago. And I mean, that is not an unusual story. And here she's 72. She's fixed income.
Golden years.
Yeah. And I mean, and so that's what's going on. And so people started crying out to Raleigh. We started getting complaints and calls from constituents and emails and so on. It really started building all through the fall because property tax bills came out last, September. And so it finally reached such a fever pitch. Speaker of the House, Destin Hall, said, "Hey, let's do a committee and to take a look at what are some solutions here because this is people have had it and it's when you look at North Carolina. I just saw a poll recently. It said that 55% or 60% of North Carolinians would struggle with a surprise $1,000 bill. Well, these taxes are going up $1,000 at a drop of a hat. And so it's really causing people to have to readjust their budgets and to think about what they're doing. When you take a lady, my example that I gave you with that lady, she's on a fixed income. What does she do to meet this tax burden? Does she call Meals on Wheels? Does she stop taking medicine? I mean, there's not a lot of options for folks when they get to that point. So anyway, we started this property tax committee, and man, I tell you what, it is far more complex than I ever realized when we looked at all the different facets of it. And so what we decided to do out of the committee is we have proposed to the General Assembly that we pass a constitutional amendment that would be on the ballot in November that would give the General Assembly the power to regulate just how much that tax can go up. The property tax rate, believe it or not, is already capped in the Constitution, but it's at $1.50 per hundred, which is huge. A lot of places aren't close to that. Some are. But what we wanted to really address is the amount that it can go up, understanding that it just crushes people's budgets. So, if the people don't want it, they can vote against it. But I think it's going to be a huge winner. And I'm assuming right now that it makes it all the way through the process and hits the ballot. I believe it will. I believe it will pass it when it comes that time of the ballot. Here's what's been really fascinating. Never before have I seen anything like this. Municipalities and counties, and typically the ones that are the biggest culprits here in this, which is really interesting, are screaming, you're going to, life, all these life-saving services are going to go away, like that every single thing that the counties and the municipalities do is a matter of life and death. And they're absolutely pounding on us. The League of Municipalities, they're passing resolutions. And like I said, a lot of them that are doing this are the ones that are the real problem. At the same time that that's going on, their constituents, their voters are emailing us saying, yes, do something about this, do something. So it's kind of an interesting issue in that we have constituents and their elected officials at each other on this issue. I've never seen anything quite like it. And so that's been an interesting wrinkle in the whole property tax debate. But that basically lays out the whole scenario at this point.
Wow. You got a lot going on up there, but from your perspective, though, what is your actual biggest challenge facing lawmakers this session?
Well, I don't think, it's interesting. One of the things that I've learned or observed, I should say, is what's happening in Raleigh and what's happening in the media and social, and it's particularly on social media, are typically far, far apart. I think the biggest thing is a budget. I think we'll get a budget. Budget will be retroactive to to the last July 1st. This is not, the Democrats are trying hard to make the budget seem like it's this catastrophic thing like it is in Washington. Well, it's not, because we are on a budget. We're on the last budget that we passed. The only thing that's there is just the different new things. Just announced, the biggest issue is the whole Medicaid dollars, and they just came to an agreement. That press release came out, I think, yesterday, that there's been an agreement on that between the House and the Senate. That was a big stumbling block. There's a few others, but that'll get worked out. That's probably the biggest pressing issue for all of us, is let's just get that nailed down, kind of get that off the deck. And then there'll be some other issues and bills that'll get passed and moved, and everything at this point will be looked at, as to, is this something that we need to do right now in the short session, particularly before an election, or is it something is long session? I've had folks come to me with issues for this session, and I take a look at it. I'm like, that's going to take a lot more work. We need more time on that. That's going to be a long term, that's a long session issue. Because understand, we don't want to shortchange stuff. The property tax committee, to give you a perfect example, we got into it, and it is so complicated and so complex that it was supposed to be a short-term committee, in other words, a temporary kind of committee. It's now been turned into a standing committee because there is so much there to deal with. Everything from exemptions. There's all kinds of exemptions out there that exist. Everybody here's the thing about taxes. We just finished, May 5th or April 15th. What were we trying to do? Figure out how to pay the least amount of taxes. Everybody wants that. No property tax, no sales tax. Let's have no income tax. But I don't hear anybody saying, hey, let's not have roads, and let's not have police, state troopers, and let's not have,
Well,
the
now
fair.
you have somebody, I'm sorry, Jeff, I just interrupt. You have some people saying we don't need police,
Yeah.
but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I want to live in that world. So it's really going to be an interesting, dynamic in that everybody wants to try to get out of taxes. And so it's the same with property tax. So we're trying to sort through all of that and figure out what's a fair way to tax, and how do we, from my perspective, how do we incentivize, maybe is not the right word, but you'll understand what I mean, our municipalities and our counties and our state to be more frugal or more cost conscious. Now, listen, there's a lot of counties that are absolutely running tight as a tick, and they're doing a great job. Same with municipalities. But there are those that, just as we've seen with the property tax, they have no problem passing on large bills to us. And so, trying to think through all of that. So anyway, it becomes much more complicated. So when it comes to our issues, there are some issues, just like the property tax issues. Hey, this needs to get kicked into a long session issue. It's going to take a lot more work. It's going to take a lot more committee meetings. It's going to take, a lot more behind the scenes work. And that's the part people don't see, is all the work that goes in when we're writing a bill, when we're trying to get it ready to even be filed. And then the issues that come up, and okay, it goes to a committee. Well, let's work on that. We've got bills that come out of certain committees, like the Reg Reform Committee that I'm chairman of. A tremendous amount of work on that. It'll be all year long. And lots of times, when we pass a Reg Reform bill, it's like the last week of session because we work so much on it. So anyway, that's where I think we're headed.
You brought up budget many times, and guess what the American people out here are bringing up to me all the time? Budget. Taxes to me are first, but tax reform, but budget is really, really hot on people's minds in your district and everyone else's. Can you tell me where we stand on that? I think you touched on some of it already.
Yeah, so there's been a few sticking points that we've been working through. There's differences between the House budget and the Senate budget, and um, you know, one thing I will would encourage people: the state of North Carolina is fiscally extremely sound. I mean, we are in the top, like the top five consistently. We are, we have really turned this ship around, and we are moving in the right direction. Look at our tax rate now is 3.99%. Nobody's complaining about that. Um, and and there are triggers to try to take that even lower and to continue to get the most out of our tax dollars. And so we're working on that. Now the state government is a big machine, and so it's a big job to try to do that. And I know you'll find this hard to believe, but the bureaucrats aren't always on our side on that stuff, and so we've got resistance. But that's where we're working. And so
a little bit.
Yeah, so be encouraged by that. I just read recently that I think it's Connecticut and Illinois could become insolvent, basically bankrupt by 2027. And so that's the other side of the coin. So we're in the, as much as people fret about, or some people try to gin up all this issues with the budget, and listen, we're in the top five,
Wow,
and so we should take solace. Yeah. I mean, we are solid. We have very, very little debt. Of the debt that we basically have at this point are bonds that were issued that we can't pay ahead on. But it's a small amount. We've got money in the bank. We saw with Helene how easily we were able to write checks. I mean, we stroked, I want to say, $2 billion in checks right out of the gate. We did the very first bill we did was $967 million, and we wrote a check for that. We did not run around and beg for money or put out bonds or borrow money or get in debt to this federal government or anything. We were able to do that because we were managing ourselves responsibly. So when you see the House and the Senate kind of having some differences in the budget, understand they are both great budgets. They are both working towards making sure that we continue to be at the top fiscally, because when we are in great shape fiscally, it's less burden on our constituents. Like I said, a 3.99% tax rate is great. We could get to a point where there'd be a 2.99% here, not very far in the future. Depends a little bit on how things go with the overall economy, but things are booming. Things are really moving well.
Well, I really want to thank you for your update on the budget and, of course, the taxes, because those taxes are a really big hot topic around everywhere. Now, for the folks listening at home, and this message is going directly to your constituents in your district and all over the 10th district. I'm very proud of what we're doing. You've been on before. Amazing outreach. So for folks listening at home, how do these decisions in Raleigh actually impact their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Depending on the bill, depending on the issue, it impacts. Some of it impacts pretty instantly. If we get to a point where we have the constitutional amendment that passes, we come back in a long session next year, and let's just say we decide, hey, if you're going to levy an increase of tax, it can't go up more than $250 a year, for instance. I'm not saying that's what we're doing. I'm just using this example. But, that impacts immediately. I mean, that's bam, right away. We have other tax, the tax rate that people just finished their taxes, but the new tax rate now is 3.99%. That's going to impact you next year immediately when you go ahead and do your taxes. So some of this stuff is real immediate. Some of it is much more big picture kind of things that, where we're working. I work on reg reform, and so we're dealing with regulations and trying to make things more user friendly, get rid of old regulations, update regulations, and as you know, affordability is a gigantic issue. Whether it doesn't matter what you're talking about in North Carolina, but affordability is going up. Let me tell you a dirty little secret. The reason things are becoming more unaffordable is regulation. We are literally regulating ourselves to death. And so one of the things that I was a part of this year, had to override the governor on this, which I'm proud that we did that, was House Bill 402. And what that does is it requires a fiscal review of every single rule and every new rule. And so what that means is, you talked about how does it impact your constituents directly. So a regulation comes out, and it's going to cost money. It's going to cost my constituents. It's going to cost the constituents of the 10th district all the constituents in the state some amount of money to be able to meet that regulation. So what this does is says, okay, well, let's look at how much that's going to be. And so if it's more than $5 million across the state in 1 year, what that says is let's go back. In order for that to happen, it's got to go back to the General Assembly and be voted on. It's got to be approved by your representatives if it's going to be a regulation that's going to cost more than that. The reason is we kind of view that as a tax, right? And so if it's between 1 and 5 million, it goes back to the Rules Committee and they can approve that rule, but it has to be a unanimous vote. In other words, it's got to be a good rule, because not all regs are bad. It's got to be a good rule. If it's less than $1 million, they have to have a 2/3 majority to pass it. And so that's a swipe at affordability. Now, does that have an instant impact on our constituents? No. Does it have a long-term impact on our constituents? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely it does. And so all the bills are that way. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some have more immediate impact than others. Usually it's the ones that have more immediate impact that we hear about. The other ones kind of just aren't on people's radar, which is probably doesn't necessarily have to be. But that's how it works, and that's what we're looking at. And so I spend a lot of time on stuff that actually impacts directly to the constituents, and really trying to attack some of this affordability issue.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you for your honest update. I will tell you, I know you as Jeff.
Yep.
Everybody that knows you as Jeff, really knows you.
Absolutely.
You're a real person, honest update, God-fearing, God-loving person. And, I like
Yes,
that's one of your best qualities. Now, I'm going to say you by your title, Representative Jeff Zenger. We appreciate you talking to us and taking the time to join us and give clear, honest update on Raleigh. No, I'm going to say BS floating around. I like the direct approach. These conversations matter because they help connect what's actually happening in the state to people like me, just simple person, and all of your constituents. And to the listeners out there, when you turn into the difference makers, I want you to do an honest assessment on people who are actually going out there, putting their pants on, putting their boots on, and making a difference in our world today. And let's keep them where they're at so they can continue in the years to follow, making that difference. Jeff, I'm going to go back to Jeff, if that's okay. Give me a closing argument for you and the last real message to sum everything up to the people here in North Carolina.
Yeah, so I want everybody the biggest thing I want people to come away with, I want you to be encouraged. I want you to be encouraged by the state of our state government and the direction we're going and how we're moving. There's always things that pop up. There's always things that could be better. We can't do everything all at once, right? But we are moving. We're moving in a great direction. We have been for 15 years. And so we need you all to get fired up and help us make sure that we hold majorities and super. We'd like to get super majority back in the General Assembly, in the House, I should say, and hold it in the Senate, and help us do that because we can continue to do great policies. Listen, the bottom line is politics is very simple. It's about policies and outcomes. Good policy, good outcomes. When you see a bad outcome, there's a bad policy somewhere. And so that's what it's all about. We are doing really great policies. That's why people want to come to North Carolina. That's why we have a 3.99% tax rate. I could go on and on and on and on about the great things of the state of North Carolina coming from good policy. But I tell you, if you want to take a look and see what we're fighting against, go on the state website and look up some of the bills that have been filed by the other side. Now, they haven't moved at all, but you go look at some of them, because if they regain it, that's what we've got coming. And so I'd like to tell people, listen, if you look at some of those bills, you'll realize that if Zinger goes there and does absolutely nothing, it's a victory because those things aren't going to move. But we are doing great things. All of us are. We have absolutely fantastic members that are very wise, and they all passionately want their constituents' best interest to be represented in Raleigh. And that's what I seek to do all the time. Folks don't understand that we have, in a 90,000 person district, there's a lot of different kind of constituents. And so how you navigate what you do to help the most people is really challenging, but we're up to the challenge. We're doing a great job at it. We're going to continue to do it. So God bless you guys. I really love serving, and thank you for listening to me this morning. And Alex, thank you for doing this and having me on.
I've looked at some of those bills, Jeff, and that is the difference between Friday the 13th movie and Christmas. I mean,
Yeah.
it's scary stuff. But listen, my name is Alex Nelson. I'm your humble host, reminding you and the citizens out there to stay informed because an informed citizen, truly informed citizen, makes a stronger community. Stronger community makes an extremely stronger state, and the best state in the United States. As long as we're strong, the United States is strong. Thank you for being with us, Representative Zinger. As always, it is a pleasure. Over and
Thank
out.
you.